So the next Env200 has arrived for its 50 kilowatt hour pack. This is the one that I've built up previously, and you can find videos for it on my channel, but it's here. So today we're going to do the swap over, plug the battery in, obviously recharge the aircon and go from there. Here we go, another stress test. This one's on an Env200, as you can see from the VIN number. It's got fairly low HX, but even at this low state of charge, really good millivolt balance when we're going gently. But we're going to do it properly, give it the full beans, and then we'll see what we get. All the way to the floor. This time flat on the floor. Yeah, it's pulling 220 amps, so that's good. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's a really good example of how a low HX isn't an indication of a bad battery anymore. That's it. Just because people always used to just take the battery quality from the state of health and the HX, but as you can see here, 61% HX. If we do the same again as we're going this way, so foot to the floor. Really good, 35 millivolts. Okay, that'll do nicely. And there we go, another stress test proving that HX isn't the be all and end all of the battery condition. You have to do this stress test. This one's at a nice low state of charge, so it's really meaningful, and it shows that this particular battery is really strong still. All good. So as always, first job is to disconnect the 12 volt battery. The negative terminal is the one to take off because you can't get any short circuits from there. This one looks like it's got a nice new battery in, which is good. So I've undone the 10mm, that just pops off. Need to make sure that's not going to go back on anyhow. So for this particular one, what I'm going to do, because that's falling back into place, I'm just going to put a bit of cloth between the terminal like that, and that can't make contact by mistake. And then the next job is to take out the battery master cutoff. So the battery master cutoff is underneath the front of the in the car, underneath the car, at the front of the battery, not like on the Leaf where it's between the rear seats. This one's at the front, so there's a little plastic tray that goes in here, and it's only held in position with one 10mm screw, or you can use a Phillips screwdriver for that. We've got 3 bolts here holding this cover down over the battery master cutoff. We've also got here the crash data recorder if you ever need to access it. Really easy on these, and they are completely plug and play, so if you have an issue with a vehicle that's been crashed and the data can't be removed from these, then you can buy either a replacement unit from a car that hasn't been crashed, or do what I've done with mine, which is to get a new EEPROM chip, sold it in without the data, and then you're ready. So we're just going to take this panel off and we'll go from there. So clearly you didn't need to see me taking all 3 of the bolts out, because bolts are bolts, eh? But anyway, here comes the 3rd one, and then you'll see that the panel just lifts out and up from underneath this little wiring loom that goes to the center console here. So there we go, 3rd bolt tucked out of the way. The panel comes up and out, and there is the normal cutoff that we're used to. So it lifts up. Sometimes they're a little bit awkward if they've not been lifted up before, as this one's being. So again, I'm going to need 2 hands. So I'll whip this out, and then we're going to send the car up in the air and proceed from there. So there we go, that's got that removed. I just place it there, and then once the battery is parked outside, I can refit it to keep it watertight. So here we go underneath. So here we are with this Env200 up in the air. You can see that I've put the jack legs underneath the suspension mounts here, and I've deliberately put them under the front subframe here because if you go under the jacking point on the sill here, it's actually quite easy to obstruct where these front mountings for the front under tray need to be taken down. So I go underneath the front cross member here, and then that's nice and solid. It's further apart than the jacking points are as well, so it's more stable. And at the back, obviously, because it's on the suspension legs, that's really strong and stable too. Ideal. So as always, the next task is to remove the front under trays, or the battery under trays. They have these typical plastic clips and some 10mm nuts. The clips fail with monotonous regularity, so I carry replacements on the shelf. These ones I use come from Romix. They're B22088. You can also use the C10077. They're pretty much universal, but I carry plenty of those on the shelf because they often fail when they come apart. My little trick is to use a little plastic bag here that I put the fastenings for each under tray in, and then put the bag with each under tray when I've taken it down, and then it's easy to remember which or how many nuts, bolts, retainers, clips, whatever you want to call them, go with each under tray. So onwards. So that's all the 10mm bolts removed. I use this generic trim clip retaining tool, trim clip removing tool, to just slide in underneath the center section of the clips, and then they pull out. Those will go in the same plastic bag as the nuts, and then I'll tuck it all together. One thing to watch out for, which is very different to the Leaf, is that at the very front here there's a plastic clip that goes underneath the wheel arch liner and holds the front of the battery under tray on, and it's important not to forget that one, otherwise the under tray's not coming down. So that's all the under trays removed and parked across to one side with their relevant plastic bags with bolts and plastic clips in. As with many Leaf batteries, the EMV has these two zinc earth straps in it as well. These ones can just fold out of the way while we're doing the battery swap. Just trying to fiddle this one round so it's up above the brake cable, but it doesn't want to go, so we'll just live with it there. So next job is to just back off the main retaining bolts, and then I'm going to take off the high voltage and low voltage connections and undo the aircon connector. This has already been drained and evacuated, and I put a plastic bag over the connector to cover it while it's disconnected so that it doesn't take on any dirt or anything. I'll show you that when we get there. So here I've just removed the 10mm bolt from the aircon connector, pulled the bracket back and covered it with a plastic bag held on with a zip tie, just to make sure no muck goes on the ends here. So pull back the clip on the HV connector. There's a squeeze that needs to be done in there, and then the black thing comes back. This one releases later on when it's 2/3 the way back. On the PTC heater connector we have to just release this clip, and then that one will just press in and slide off. Two-handed job, I'm afraid, so I'm going to need both hands to do that rather than to show you on the video. And then the can connector just twists to the left and turns off. That's nice and easy. On the PTC heater you can see here how the little green security section just slides away from the tab, and then this tab presses in to release the lock inside there, and then it just slides off. So now everything just connected, all three wiring, aircon and the 2 earth. It's now time to put my trolley with jack underneath it so I can get that to take the weight, and then we'll take the main bolts out and drop the battery. So I've got my trailer with hydraulic lift lined up underneath the battery. Just going to let the ramp down now until the battery is resting comfortably on the pallets. You can see here how the gap gradually just comes down to nothing. And there we go. Once it's got some weight on it, I'm going to use a buzz gun just to whip out the bolts, and then I can lift the car back up off the trolley and jack assembly, and then I can lower it down to get it outside and swap it over for the replacement unit, which we've built up with a 50 kilowatt hour kit from Vivna. And here we go, all the battery bolts are out. So I now lift up the lift, double checking that everything's undone. Take the lift back up to its marked safe top height. That's all good, so I can take the security bar out of the lift and let the lift down in one smooth movement. There we go. Because I've built this with an electric mover on the front, it's ready just to drive this outside, and then I can drive the other one in, having swapped them over with an engine crane. What I will just point out here is the aircon plugs. What I do is I put some protective tape over these so that they can't fill up with anything unusual. But obviously, because the battery is now parked, I'm putting the top back in. What I do have is the 3D printed covers for the battery terminals. So I'm going to take them from the battery that's going in now and put them onto the battery that's coming out. And that way this one's ready just to park until we either find a buyer for it or until the customer comes to pick it up, or, which I believe is going to be the case with this one, we break the kit open and build it into one of Vivna's solar storage systems. So we're waiting for that decision, but in the meantime I'm going to seal this up and take it outside. All the batteries have a generic part number on them, but they also have a unique serial number to identify them. This one shows that it's a 40 kilowatt hour. The original battery, again, it has generic part number and a serial number, but I've modified the label to show what's inside it, so it doesn't say 24 kilowatt hours anymore. And you can see how the lid is raised slightly with their spacer, but the difference is marginal. So the kit actually comes with some spacers to go between the mounting brackets and the body too, and some longer bolts, so everything that you need is in there. It's ideal. So before I even swap this onto the trolley, I've taken the battery cutout off it, I've taken the protective covers off these, and I've taken the protective cover off the aircon hoses, so this is ready to swap onto the trailer, take inside and bolt it in. So here are the new longer bolts and the spacers that come with the kit. You can see here how the bolts are basically longer by the size of the spacer. It means that there's no shortage of thread inside the mountings when it all goes up. So what we'll do is we'll drop the car down so that it's close, and then when it gets really close we'll pop the spacers in, and then we can just use a pry bar like this to get the final alignment done. To get the bolts started, once all 8 of them are started, I can buzz them in with the air gun, and then when it's all lifted back up again in the reverse procedure of what I did to dismantle it, I can use the power bar to make sure they're all nice and tight. So I've now got all 8 bolts and spacers started off in their holes by hand. I've got the ramp lowered so that the battery is basically flush up against the spacers, so now I can just buzz them up with the air gun and then tighten them with the power bar once it's fully up in the air and ready to finish. So I've tightened up all the bolts with the power bar. You can just see the spacers in there and the spacer for the lid that they produce. I've already put the aircon connector back on. The high voltage connector just pushes back on, and when it's all lined up properly, see if I can do it with one hand. Yep, there we go. And then you need to re-engage the security clip, and then the PTC connector similar. Push it on, make sure it clips home, and then do the security clip, and then the CAN connector just slides back on like that. Now when I've got to this stage, before I refit any of the under trays, I like to just put the battery breaker back on, connect up the 12 volt, make sure that everything is well with the replacement battery before we get fully committed, and then we can just lift it back up and do the under trays afterwards. Beauty with that is we can put some extra charge in it while we're finishing off, and then it's more full for when the customer sets off to go home. So the battery cutoff is installed. I've put the 12 volt negative terminal back on. I have corrosion prevention spray that I put on everything that I open the bonnet on, so I've put that on here as well. So we're now ready to go for a start, although the instructions from Vivnes say to go for a first start without pressing the brake pedal, and then we can clear the P3102 fault code that will result from the unpaired battery. So there we go. I'm just sorry, I think the battery's a bit weak in the fob. Shut the door. Right, so that's now live. I'm going to switch over to LeafSpy. I do actually have a video on my channel here on clearing the unpaired battery code P3102 from memory. But yeah, I've already got a video up, so I'm not going to bore you with showing you that again. So I'm just going to do that and I'll be right back.